Hey folks, it's Rob Flux here with another Sunday session, and tonight is open mic night, which means that it's your chance to ask me any question you can. And in order to do that, what we ask you to do is actually to submit your questions in advance by clicking on the link below, propdev.info/open mic. By doing that allows me to do a little bit of homework on your particular question so I can add value to the process. Now, that said, we've got a cracking show ahead of us today. But one of the things that I do want to do before going too far into the process is to announce some really exciting news. Now, most of you know that we've been running meetups all the way around the country for many years, 13 years in fact, but we've been threatening to do this in Perth for a very long period of time. And so I am pleased to say, Perth, we are now officially coming your way. We are having some pre-launch drinks in the next couple of weeks, so watch out for that by going to our events page. And at that event, we're going to be launching and announcing the actual go live dates. And that means that we will be running in Perth, I guess, on a regular ongoing basis every single month. So that takes us from running approximately 45 events a year to just approaching 60 events per year, all the way around the country, which is super exciting news. So Perth, if you are watching this show and you love the content that we create, we're going to have industry experts, we're going to have real deal presenters, we're going to have our stereotypical masterminding, we're going to have networking and social drinks and a whole bunch more. So please watch out for that. Now, all of that said, I guess that there is one other special announcement that I'd like to talk to as well. And that is that twice a year we run an event called Developer Launchpad. It's a 2-day event and it's going to be held on the 28th of February and the 1st of March. So 2 days, it is 9 a.m. to 4 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. Now, for those of you who don't understand time zones, that is Brisbane time, okay? So please make sure that you actually do the appropriate calculations for your particular time zone. But they are cracking full-day events where I give you a whole bunch of things with regards to what's happening in and around our community, both from a legislative updates perspective, and we have seen the greatest legislative changes in the last 50 years. I've been privileged to be sitting at the table with Queensland Government, New South Wales Government, Victoria Government, a couple of local councils, I guess sitting at the table in some instances helping them to write the rules, in other instances reviewing the rules before they go live so that everyone can actually see so we can actually give feedback on whether or not we think they're actually going to be great. So I'm going to go through those. I'm going to go through my market updates and I'll go through the common issues, challenges, and problems that you guys have in your community as to how you can actually not only start in property development, but also scale your property development business. So Developer Launchpad, 28th of Feb and the 1st of March. Watch out for that. Now, all of that said, that is not the point of the show. The point of the show is open mic night. So we've got a ton of questions. So let's get into our very first question. So very first question comes from Vincent. Vincent says, thank you so much for all your support. I'm based in Victoria. I would like to know if I've just brought my new home, and I do have a big backyard, and I would like to put a second dwelling and then sell that and keep my home. How can I go about it? That's a great question, Vincent, but something that I'd like to clarify here. There's a distinction between putting a secondary dwelling in your back home, i.e. a granny flat or similar, as opposed to a second home, which is going to be on its own title. Now, a secondary dwelling is going to be 2 dwellings on 1 title. Now, if you do that, you'll be able to generate some rent from that secondary dwelling, subject to your local council and whether or not they actually allow you to rent that out. Now, it's called a granny flat, and you'll find that a lot of councils only want that to be granny, okay, someone who is a member of your community. There are other councils that are a little bit more open-minded and recognize that that is a great way to, I guess, provide housing for the community. So you need to sanity check that for your particular council. But secondary dwellings won't allow you to actually sell down that second dwelling. Now, a subdivision, however, or perhaps a duplex, depending upon the legislation that applies to you, that will actually create a second dwelling, and more specifically, will allow you to have that on its own title. That will allow you to sell that down and sell that off. Now, the size of those dwellings will change dramatically depending upon, I guess, the size of your land, the zoning of your land, the frontage that you've got, and whether or not you've got side access to actually get down there. But know that it is absolutely possible, but be aware of the distinction between the two. And so in order to learn how to do that, mate, what I would suggest, there's a whole bunch of things that you want to start to do. Firstly, you talk to a town planner, that they're going to give you some insights into your particular council, the zoning, the frontage requirements, and the like, the land size requirements that you're going to need, and how wide your driveway is going to need to be. That's probably the first mere minimum, but I would also suggest coming to our regular meetups all the way around the country. We just kind of touched on them in the sec. Start to, I guess, hang around with other people who are actually doing it. The other thing that I would suggest is maybe consider just doing this little free course that I run. It's called the 7-Step Formula to Financial Freedom. Now, it's not going to teach you the end-to-end process of property development, but it is going to give you a really good overview of the entire process. So you know what it is that you're actually getting into, mate, so that you can then determine whether or not that's something you want to take on. Now, it's very achievable. We've got tens of thousands of people doing that all the way around the country. So I guess strongly recommend do that particular free course, come to some of our meetups. And then from there, I guess once you actually understand whether or not that's something you do want to take on, then next steps will be whether or not you want to do that on your own reconnaissance, whether or not you want to partner with somebody who's actually done that before and kind of shadow them, whether or not you actually want to get some formal mentorship or a whole bunch more. But basically get that overview first, set the foundations right, and with the foundations, mate, you can crack on and do some amazing things. So well done, Vincent. Next question comes from Maria. Maria says, are getting modular homes being built worth the effort, and how much does it add to your value? This is another, I guess, interesting question, because there's a very distinct difference between a modular home and a prefabricated home. So modular home, they're both made in a factory, but modular home tends to come pre-assembled and is more like that granny flat type scenario, where it comes in on the back of a truck and just gets kind of placed on site. But they typically, you might be able to put a couple of modules together to actually form a bigger home, but they're going to typically be someone else's design, okay? So, and because it's going to be someone else's design, you're going to buy it off of a catalog. There's going to be some efficiency in that, but there's also, I guess, some, compromises that they make in that, in order to make it more applicable to everyone everywhere, okay? Prefab home, however, is more, it's actually a custom home built for you, still in a factory, but you can actually customize that to your particular requirements. Now, for a prefab home, you're going to get efficiencies of scale when you do the same home many, many times. So if I'm doing a townhouse project at the moment, for example, where we're putting 18 dwellings on the same site, and so because of that, we get to choose and build the same design 18 times, okay? And so we get very, very cost-efficient design in doing that, because the setting everything up for the first one can be a little bit expensive, but when you actually start to roll out many, many of these, they start to become super efficient. That's where the modular homes start to come in, because they're doing the same design many, many times. And because of that, they're getting efficiency in their design, but it is their design, it's not your design. So the answer to that is, well, it really comes down to the quality of that particular builder, if you're going to take someone else's design. So make sure that you're actually going and inspecting their finishes, the level of finish, that sort of thing, not just through a catalog, but actually physically go inside an installed home that they have delivered to somebody else. Okay. Now they can be very, they can add a lot of value. Now, how much value that actually adds really comes down to how well you've actually designed that into the landscape. So is it going to be obvious where, you know, it's just kind of plonked on the land and it's got stumps and you can kind of see underneath it, and you haven't really designed that well? Or are you actually going to go to the effort of actually digging those foundations in, making it look like it's flat on the ground, getting it to actually blend into everything around. Is the style, I guess, very similar to everything around you? So all of that is how long is a piece of string. So very, very worthwhile doing the process. I would say it's a much more efficient way to actually do a construction. It doesn't necessarily save money from a construction, I guess, cost perspective, but what it does do is mean efficiency of the build. You can actually build much, much faster, so your holding costs are down, so the project profitability is up, even though the construction cost may not necessarily be the same. In some instances, prefab and modular housing can be a tiny bit more expensive, but it's the efficiency of time that actually makes these things, I guess, of most advantage to everyone. So, but very worthwhile actually going and investigating. Prefab is the way of the future. That comes in, I guess, a modular, what they call kit of parts. So you kind of design all the parts. They may come from many, many factories, and they actually then assemble them on site. Or you can have what they call volumetric. Now, volumetric is when it's actually completely built, I guess, and comes in a very similar format to what the modular homes are coming in, where they're actually all already pre-built as a module, but you can actually custom design those, as we said. Anyway, Maria, hoping that helps you understand the differences between them. Next question comes from Rajiv. He says, "Hi, Rob. I hope you're doing well. I'm trying to step into property development and currently building at the rear of my house. We're facing challenges with the builder delaying the project. It's been 18 months of the build so far since work has commenced, with no sign of completion or handover. May I seek your guidance to explore options under the HIA contract?" So Rajiv, a couple of things here. I can't give you individual legal advice here because it's just not something I'm allowed to do, okay? But what I can say is that whether it be a HIA contract or a master builder's contract, those contracts are designed by the building industry to favor the builders, okay? And so if you did not get your lawyer to review that contract up front and put specific clauses in there to even the playing field, then it may all be in their favor. So you want to be very careful here with regards to, did you seek legal advice up front? And even if you didn't, you should probably go seek some legal advice now. Now, don't go to a normal everyday lawyer. What you want to do is go to a construction lawyer who specializes in these construction contracts, and they understand all the idiosyncrasies and loopholes that are actually sitting inside these contracts, okay? Now, again, whether it's master builders or HIA, the version of that contract changes from state to state to state. So there are slightly different idiosyncrasies in each state of those. But in general, there's a couple of clauses that you always want to be looking at. And one is called liquidated damages. Liquidated damages is the penalty on the builder should they actually be running late. Now, most builders will try to negate those and write those off at $0 cost or very, very minimal cost. But if you did have a lawyer review it, you're actually legally entitled to actually charge the true costs of the delays. So it would be interest rates at peak debt, it would be land tax, it would be rates, it would be the loss of revenue that you may have had because of the fact that you weren't able to rent that out or live in it, or a whole bunch of other things. So you're able to do those calculations up front, calculate what those liquid damages would be, and then it's a negotiation with your builder as to whether or not they actually want to allow that to come in, okay? So if you did that up front, then you've got a whole bunch of power right now. If you didn't do that up front, then you don't have a lot of power, I'm afraid, my friend. And so speaking to that solicitor is very much the best thing to do, to actually see, is there anything in that contract that will actually give you any other capabilities in there. Now, that said, as soon as you get to lawyers at 20,000 paces, at 20 paces, things get nasty, right? So relationships are super important in this process too. So obviously, you don't want to just talk to your builder and say, "Why are you late?" Bang the desk, all that sort of stuff. What you want to do is actually understand how and what can actually be done in order to get through the other side. Now, typically what you find is, if a project is running that late, there's probably some cash flow issues in that builder's arsenal, and it's a very telltale sign that sometimes the builder is approaching going broke. Okay, so you want to be very careful here to actually have an integrity conversation, understand where they're sitting, and you be managing the process to make sure that tradies are actually getting paid and turning up, because if they're not getting paid, that's what slows the process down. It can also be just poor project management skills, or he's got too many projects on, or things like that. But a slow project is an indication that that builder might be in a little bit of trouble, mate. So, and for those reasons, understanding and having an integrity conversation and going, hey, how do we manage this through to the end? You don't want him going under when the project is not complete. Okay, what you want to do is manage him through and just say, look, I'm concerned at the timelines here, concerned that we're not achieving, I'm not seeing any trades on site. Is it a cash flow challenge? How can we work together to actually get this through? I'm very much wanting to, I guess, get this completed, as I'm sure that you want to get it off your books because you can't take on another project without it. How do we get there, please, mate? So I would have the conversation, and I would also speak to a lawyer to understand what your legal rights are. Now, if you have to go down the legal path, then by having the conversation, at least you're forewarned and forearmed with what your options are under the legal process, and you know whether or not you can push hard or not push hard or all those sorts of things. But should it get down that path, legal can get expensive, and depending upon how you negotiate it up front, can be a little tricky, my friend. So be very, very careful there. Now, next one, hoping that helps, Rajiv. Next one comes from Singyu. Singyu says, how can I use my resources strengths as a tradie to find an experienced developer to work with and mentor me on my first project? I believe that for beginners, completing an entire project is the most important first lesson. By chance, I've come across a proven method to shorten my development cycles, and I can even get some materials equipment on credit, which I think will greatly optimize my financial models. How do I know where to begin? So that was Singyu. Singyu, mate, the fact that you're a tradie means that you're involved in the process and you know one part of the process very, very, very well, okay? And that whatever your trade is, whether you be a chippy or a plumber or a builder or whatever, okay, what you're wanting to do is get exposure to the entire process. So I did touch on this before, the 7-step formula to financial freedom. I'd highly recommend that you actually go and I guess have a look at what are the steps involved in that. I'd also recommend that you come to our meetups and actually start hanging around with other people that are actually doing it. You asked, where can I meet someone? This is the place that you can actually start to meet them. Okay, so come to those events, let them know what your skills and capabilities are and that sort of thing. But before going into that thing, and then if you really, really, really want to, we also have a formal education and mentoring program as well called Property Development Formula, but not here to do a sales pitch, just letting you know that that is there for completeness. What I would suggest though is there's a couple of pros and cons in what you're proposing. Firstly, you're right, you'll get huge exposure to a real world scenario, and you're going to understand a great number of issues and challenges that are actually going to sit there. Okay, but, and here's the but, it doesn't going to tell you, it's going to show you what are the issues and challenges on that site, but it'll only expose you to those problems on that site. Okay, so if there are other things and other lessons to be learned, you're not going to get exposure to those. And so when you go into the next project, you won't know to necessarily look for those. Okay, so you want to broaden your horizons a little bit on that particular thing. The other thing is it doesn't show you not just can it be done, but should it be done, and not only should it be done, but where should it be done? Where are profitable areas? So the whole find it and fund it issue is the most common challenge that everybody has in the property development game. So I would be putting a hell of a lot of your research into how to find it, how to fund it. Then the running it part is actually the easy part. That's just a process. If you think that just shadowing someone and thinking that that is actually going to give you everything you want, it's only about a third of it. The 2/3 of it is actually the finding it and funding it part. Getting that part right is the hard part. So you're going to get some lessons, but my concern is that you're not going to get enough lessons out of the process. The other thing that I'd say is with our meetups, Every single one of our meetups, we have somebody presenting a real deal every single month. So that is warts and all, the good, the bad, and the ugly of a project, which means we have got a back catalogue of all those real deal recordings that you can actually get access to. Now, depending upon your strategy, we've had over 350 of these real deals recorded in our system that you can actually go back and do some homework on. So if you want to have access to the back catalogue, then you can actually become an annual member, and that will not only give you access to our meetups themselves, but also give you access to the back catalogue. So what you can do is then research and go, if I want to do subdivisions, for example, if I want to do duplexes or townhouses or whatever your development strategy is, you can go and research every single one of those developments that someone else has done and learn from their lessons even before you find a mentor. One, it's going to give you some exposure to the kind of people doing the deals. They might be the people you might want to reach out to on an individual basis if you like the way they go. You also are going to get heaps of lessons from what they did, both what they did well and what they did not so well. Okay, so my strong encouragement is to go and have a look at some of those back catalogs, mate. That said, kudos and welcome to the journey, my friend. Next question comes from Tim. Tim says, "Hi, Rob. My question is probably the same one that you've been asked 1,000 times before. What is the best way to start in property development? I'm 58 years old and looking to build a skill set that I can use for the next 10 or 20 years and then pass on the knowledge gained to my kids. I think there's a lot of information in the process that needs to be followed for a subdivision project, but the tricky part at the start is knowing the numbers and all of the associated costs, i.e. cost of services, the property, the survey costs, legals, etc. Thank you very much, Tim." So Tim, I kind of just touched on this literally moments ago, so I'm not going to repeat myself end to end, but I would say turn up to our meetups. I guess that's going to expose you to a whole bunch of things. Consider doing the annual membership and looking at the back catalogue of things. Do the 7-step formula to actually understand the end-to-end process. And if you really, 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 I guess, wanting to know not just can you, but how to, that's where the property development formula side of things actually comes in. So pretty much all the same advice that I gave to the previous question. So hope you get plenty from that, mate. Turn up to the meetups. Great place to hang around with people that are actually doing it. You're saying that you want to do it for 10 to 20 years, though, mate. I'm going to say that with some of the things that we teach, 5-year property action plan is what we're actually teaching you to try and learn how to start small, scale, step up and scale, so that in 5 years' time, the majority of people on paper should be able to be financially free. That doesn't mean you want to stop. That just means that you're in a position where you get enough passive income to pay all of your living expenses. If you want to keep doing that and start to scale and start to get quality lifestyles and those sorts of things, then a lot of people can and do keep going. But sometimes people just want to get to a comfortable place and stop. Next question comes from Jason. Jason says, I was looking for any advice regarding my situation as a 22-year-old. I'm currently work for a residential property developer in Sydney, about 8 months in, and whilst I've got pretty lucky with such an opportunity, I'm struggled to learn much. My boss doesn't give me much work, and so the majority of my days will include 4 hours of idle work in the office, with the occasional site visit, probably twice a week to 3 to 4 sites. I suppose that what I'm asking is more general, is that for someone who aims to be a residential property developer in my late 20s, what are some realistic skills and practices I can get into in my free time? That is a fantastic question, Jason, and well done, mate, for, I guess, being so young and wanting to start this journey. I personally was 18 when I bought my first property and 21 when I bought my first investment property. So getting in young means that you've got time on your hands, my friend. A lot of us that are starting later in life, time starts to be our enemy. And so we have to do things in a hurry and actually rush. But you've got lots of time on your hands, my friend. Not only do you have literally 4 hours a day on your hand, but you've actually got, I guess, time for life. So my strong encouragement is don't be in a hurry, okay? Take the time to learn the trade. This is genuinely a new trade. Okay, so this is like anything else. If you want to become a lawyer, if you want to become a doctor, if you want to become any career out there at all, an engineer, you're going to have to learn how to do the process. Okay, now you can learn many ways. You can learn by as you've done, actually working for a developer. Now, in this particular instance, the fact that they're not including you on things is probably because they don't feel that at this point in time you can add value to their process. So you've got to find ways to say, how can I add value to those processes? Now, when you're going on site, not knowing why they're taking you on site, are you just going around as a gopher doing some things, or can you actually physically add some value? So perhaps you could do some research on the construction contract and I guess understand where they are from a project timeline perspective. Start to think about development management side of things to say, well, we've already got projects on the go. How do I actually understand the timeline of processes, how the tradies are engaged, how the builder, I guess, schedules his work? How do we actually start to do that and consider just at minimum to go, well, I've got the numbers in front of me. I've got, I guess, the contracts in front of me. I've got all the I guess the project Gantt charts and all that sort of stuff. How do I actually learn from the deals that I've actually got? Now, if you're working for a developer that's got 3 or 4 sites on, then they're a reasonable sized developer. So you're going to have a huge arsenal of actual real world data that is at your fingertips, my friend. So I would be looking at that and going, right, what do they buy it for? What are they planning to sell it for? Look at their marketing plans, read their contracts. And when you come across something that you don't understand, that gives you an opportunity to say, well, now I've got a thing to do today, which is to learn what is that thing I don't understand. And as you slowly get through that process, now this is not a formal learning style, but because you've got the I guess the back end access to all of the secret sauce, start diving in. And what that's going to do, mate, is when you start to learn about some of the things that you currently don't know, that then gives you an opportunity to speak to your boss, speak to your boss and say, hey, was just going through the contract the other day and I came across this thing. Wasn't sure what it meant. Wondering if you could give me a very quick lesson on that. Okay, show him that you are interested in furthering yourself and actually get involved and try to add value. See if you can identify a couple of things that he might have missed, and that, trust me, that happens all the time. So, mate, congratulations, Jason. Firstly, on your age. Landing a cracking job and wanting to further yourself. You're in the right place, mate. I would also say all the things that I said to our previous people, and that is come to our meetups and start to hang around with other people that are doing it, and they're going to give you some insights into some of the other things that you might be missing as well. So well done, mate. Next question comes from Jenny. Jenny says, I'm currently in the process of selling an apartment that's been underperforming. Recently, I also acquired a residential site in Moreton Bay, which is Queensland, with over 700 square meters with the potential for an existing dwelling. Now, when the apartment sale settles, I'll have some cash available and I see a couple of possible directions. Option number 1, use the funds to add another dwelling on my Queensland site, which would improve the cash flow and serviceability. However, I don't have enough funding to complete further development without taking on a loan. Option number 2, instead of developing straight away, use the sale proceeds as leverage to acquire another property, and once equity builds in the new purchase, return to the Queensland site later. The key constraint I'm managing right now is serviceability, which is also stretched. So here's the thing, Jenny. I guess you're coming into this with a investment mindset, whereas we're really a property development, sphere. So I've done 20 years of investing, so I can give you some guidance from that perspective, and I can also give you some guidance from a property development perspective. Okay, and they're very, very different. So the fact that you're asking this question in this forum, I don't know if that's because you want to do property development per se, or you're just found a property group, and so you're wanting to ask your question anyway. But property investment has a very different approach. Property investment is, I guess, buy as many properties as humanly possible, hold them for as long as humanly possible, leverage debt in order to actually get into more properties, let the market do the heavy lifting. And then once the market's done the heavy lifting at some point in the future, typically it's going to be 20 plus years away, you're going to sell down some of those properties, pay off the debt on the remaining ones, and then you're going to be positively geared. Okay, so that's the typical property investment cycle. Now, it's never about, am I going to sell some properties? It's always about, it's not if, it's when. When do I sell those properties? Okay, so, and what you'll find, and my experience in this, I guess having done it for 20 plus years as a pure investor, is that you're going to hit heaps of roadblocks along the way. One, you won't have capital, which you currently have right now, and you're selling down a property in order to get that. And two, you won't have serviceability. So your ability to get into the next property starts to become hamstrung, and you have to buy, and then you sit back and wait and let the market do some work. And then when the market's done some work, then you've got some more equity and you pull that out, then you go again and you buy, and then you keep hitting these glass ceilings over and over and over. So property investment works, but it's slow, okay, because you're constrained by your own physical resources, okay? Now, the difference with property development is that we are not constrained by our own resources. Now, the reason why investments is constrained by your resources is because the bank is expecting you to have a 20 or 30-year loan. So they want to make sure that you've got the equity, and they also want to make sure that you can actually afford to pay that loan over an extended period of time, okay? Because they make their money by that long-term play. Property development is very different. Property development is all about the short-term play. It's about manufacturing the profits in a very, very short timeline. Sometimes it's in a matter of literally months, okay? Typical project could be anywhere from 12 to 24 months in duration, but my fastest ever project has been in 6 weeks, okay? So it is very, very possible to manufacture profits in a very short period of time. Now, when you're manufacturing profits, we tend to not be looking at residential lending, but we're looking more at alternative lending methods that you may not yet be exposed to, okay? It's also exposed to alternative acquisition models, okay? So the ability to do very, very creative things like option contracts, joint ventures with the landowner, joint ventures with money partners, delayed settlement with early access, and a whole bunch of other strategies that are going to give you the ability to control the property and not necessarily own it, and be able to still force the value onto the property through that control process. Now, of course, you can own it, but if you control the property, it means you don't need anywhere near as many resources as what you think. And should you need resources, then you've also got the ability to tap into, I guess, private investors, commercial investors, equity funds, commercial lending models that all see the short-term nature and the manufactured profits side of things, and they recognize it for what it is, and so they are attracted to the proposition because they know that they can get in and out in a relatively short period of time. So property development exposes you to the ability to break out of residential lending thinking and come up to those, I guess, more creative acquisition models and the more creative funding models that will make you think that there are way more options than the two that you are currently thinking of. So whilst I can't give you advice, if property development is something that is of interest to you, then those cash resources, if you use those to pay down the debt on your current home, then that would then be cash that you could take out and use as liquid cash to run a deal. That would be equity to go into deposits for your next deal. That would be, I guess, depending upon if you can actually pay that home off, that would be security to fund a construction loan. There's a whole bunch of options that start to come to you, because it's not about, in property development, it's not about collecting as many properties as humanly possible, because debt is our enemy, whereas property investment, debt is our friend. So in property development world, we want to have as little debt as humanly possible, because we want to be fast and nimble and get in and out of deals. So we're going to ramp up our debt, do the project, make some profit, pay down the debt, and have that profit pay off other debt in other places. So then we can have that what we're trying to do in 20 years in investment world, we're trying to do in 5 years by owning just as a few number of properties, but own them outright. Okay, that's the goal. So, and for every property that you own outright, depending upon where you are, they're going to earn somewhere between $25,000 and $35,000 net per year after land tax rates, property management fees, all that sort of thing. So you don't need to own many properties to actually become financially free. Anyway, hope that helps, Jenny. Next one, I'm going to take a sip of water here. Next one comes from Kara. Kara says, as AI becomes as embedded in property development as spreadsheets are today, from site finding to FISOs to funding and everything in between, what skill sets will set successful developers apart, and how would we start cultivating them now? Also, how are you thinking about weaving AI into property developer network, embedded in its tools, creating personalizing learning paths, etc.? Well, Kara, and then she's got a joke at the end. Hal wants to know. Now, any of you who are as old as me, Hal is, I guess, the AI or the computer device. I think it was in one of the sci-fi movies way back, I guess, in the early 80s or 90s. So I can't remember the show that it was. I should have looked that up before the show. Okay, so we are using AI extensively inside, I guess, my business. So Property Developer Network, we use that for a whole bunch of automations and the like. At the moment, I guess, at the moment, it's to improve business processes and efficiencies and effectiveness to actually buy me more time. So what you'll find is AI is one of those things where what it does is it allows you to remove one of your processes and have that automated, which then buys you a small amount of time. With that small amount of time, what you then do is then invest that time into building the next AI thing, which then buys you more time. So effectively what we're actually trying to do is we're actually trying to quit our job, okay? Slowly, slowly, slowly. Now, if I give you an analogy here, as a business owner, you start out with all the jobs, okay? So I am the salesman, I'm the delivery guy, I'm the guy that does the debt collection, I'm the guy that I guess chases payments, and I'm the guy who does the accounting, I'm the guy that does the cleaning, I'm the guy that does the HR, I'm everything. So slowly, 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 as I quit a job, I don't want to do the cleaning anymore. So that buys me some more time and I can do the thing that I'm really good at. And then I don't want to be the cleaning, I want to quit the HR job. And slowly, 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 what you do is you slowly quit more and more and more jobs to become more and more efficient. That is what AI is going to do for us, okay? And so internally, we're doing that within our business right now, and we're starting to build some tools that we are going to be rolling out to our students initially, specifically to our students, because some of the practices that we teach have a lot of manual labor with regards to how we actually do our data analysis. So we want to try and help those guys to actually fast track those processes. Now, it takes quite a bit to build those things, and the reason for that is access to the data is actually quite difficult. And also quite expensive, okay, very, very expensive, accessing some of the data that we need in the property development world. Now, whilst there is some stuff out there for free, the true value is actually paid data sources. And so we're trying to build those processes now. Whether we actually roll that down into the PDN community per se, I guess we want to have some value proposition for our students. We don't want to, I guess, teach them all this stuff and then just give it to everybody else. And it's especially because it's actually costing us quite a lot to actually build those resources. But I guess your question was, what can you do about this today? Okay, what skill sets do you want to develop is what your question is. So what I would actually say is whilst we're using a lot of tools like Gemini and ChatGPT and the DeepMind and a whole bunch of others out there, the biggest thing that I see people doing wrong, okay, and remember, I come from a 20-year IT career and I understand underneath how this technology actually works. They don't understand prompt engineering. Okay, prompt engineering is the question that you're actually asking the AI. Now, most of us are treating it like a Google search, and we're just typing in a general Google search, but there's a whole bunch of things that you want to do to actually put into your prompt to make sure that it actually spits out a fantastic result for you. And the better the detail of your prompt, the better the outcome you're actually going to get. So I would say, if you want to learn anything, learn prompt engineering. And so a shortcut to do that is do a little bit of research on a thing called a master prompt. So a master prompt gives you the opportunity to have a GPT that's sitting there that you can actually ask a question to, and then it will ask you a series of questions back. And when it asks you a series of questions back, it will then generate the full prompt that you actually want to then copy and paste into a separate thing, which will then get you an amazing outcome at the very, very end. So prompt engineering and master prompts, that is the thing that I would be looking at for you. Once you've mastered that, then you can actually start to get into the AI automation side of things. And start to look at a thing called vibe coding. So vibe coding is the ability to get the GPT to actually build your software platforms and that sort of thing. But you can't do that if you can't create a great prompt so it knows exactly what you want to do. If you just go build me something that'll analyze a property site, that's not a very clear definition. But if you say using these resources in this way, I guess with these constraints, I would like you to do this particular research, and this is the output that I'm looking for. That is a prompt. Okay, so that's what you actually do. The prompt engineering, master prompt, they're the things for you. But great question, Kara. Then the next one comes from Megan. So Megan says, can you elaborate on selling a house and land package as an exit strategy? And how is this different to selling off the plan? What are the pros and cons, risks, benefits, and anything else to consider when weighing up these options? Fantastic question. So selling off the plan is very, very different to a house and land package. Okay. So let me start with the house and land package. House and land package is you selling two contracts, one for the land, and that is a contract to you, and one is for the build, and that is a contract to the builder. So you are going to join forces with the builder and say, look, your property looks really good. Your house looks really good on my block of land. Why don't we partner together to go to the marketing? Because you need a client to do a build for, and I need to exit this land. And by joining forces together, it effectively allows you to get your cash out of the deal straight away by selling it as land. It settles, and then you get out of Dodge. You're gone, you've got your cash, and you go, and you basically hand that client over to the builder, and the builder completes the project from there. And the builder, and once that's done, whatever happens with the build, you are not responsible for. So, okay, that is a contract directly with the builder. All you're doing is being a facilitator of that particular process. Okay, now you can control that process and help the people into the builder. Equally, the builder can if somebody goes into their home, open homes or their display homes, they could actually sell your land. So you can partner really well together and actually get some really great outcomes. Now, the difference between that and selling off the plan is selling off the plan, you're still doing this as one contract now. And you are responsible for making sure that that home is actually delivered to, I guess, the features that you actually sold within the contract. So in a off the plan sale, you're going to say these are the specifications, this is the color scheme, these are the tiles, the taps, all those sorts of things, and the build quality and build finish, and you are responsible for that. And at the end of the build, you don't get your cash until the very, very end. So you have to cash flow that, you have to manage that process, and you have to manage the builder through the end. Now, the opportunity is that the chances are you've manufactured more profit out of that project by managing both the build process and the land process. So you're kind of getting the development profits from both layers. But it is a little more cash heavy. It is also going to take a little bit more time to actually get to the end, and it's got a little bit more hassle factor in the process. Whereas a house and land package lets you get your cash straight away, get your risk off the table, get out of Dodge, and you are gone. So that is the primary difference between the two. Both have their merits. What I would say is do your research in your particular area. There is going to be some areas where selling as land makes the most amount of sense. And there are other areas where selling as a finished product makes the most amount of sense and hence going to make you more money. It's not always the case that building will get you more profits, so be very, very careful here. Now, this is a generalization only, but what I would say is depending upon the demographic of the area, will determine the likelihood of selling as land versus the likelihood of selling as a finished product. Now, generalization, but in the middle class areas, I would say most people are looking to build their dream home, and this is their one and only chance for them to actually have input into the process. Okay. And for that reason, selling as land is very, very attractive to them, because then they can find their builder, have their design, their color schemes, and they can do everything. But because they're not fully loaded with all the cash in the world, they want to take their time and get that right. And this is going to be a home that they're going to live in for the next 15, 20 years. Okay. If you go into a more affluent area, though, they have a lot more money. And the most important thing to them is time and convenience. Okay. And so they're willing to pay a premium for that convenience. So a finished product where they can just walk in and it is amazing and it's done everything that is needed is going to be way more efficient for them. And if it's not their perfect forever home, that's okay. They've got enough money. They will just sell that down and go buy another house somewhere else at some point in time, because convenience is way more important to them and time is more important. So generalization, as I said, with regards to how and where that's actually going to work. Next question comes from Steve. Steve says, "Hi Rob, I'm a frustrated builder who is wanting to build / develop, but I don't want to do it the traditional way. I see that many of my colleagues are going into bankruptcy. Is modular construction the way of the future? I'm dipping my toes into that world, helping a mate with a small NDOS project in Bathurst. Am I barking up the wrong tree? Should I drop the nail bag and engage other builders to do the work?" Oh boy, this is a fantastic question, Steve. And I could prattle onto this for a long period of time, but prefab housing is the way of the future, and the old school style of stick building is an archaic relic that is destined to fall away in the next 3 to 5 years, is my prediction. Okay. Lots of reasons for this. Okay, so firstly, if you build in a factory, okay, it's a controlled environment. That means it's built in a shed, and the quality of the build is going to be much better than somebody working in the blazing sun, in the rain, and all those sorts of things where the elements are sometimes not at hand. Because it's in a factory, you're going to find that the tradies don't need to spend half an hour or 45 minutes emptying their toolbox at the start of the day and then loading the truck up at the end of the day. Those sorts of things. They don't need to whip out to Bunnings because they forgot their nails, or they need some screws or whatever it is. But rather, there's a wall with all the tools that they need. There's also, I guess, an inventory of materials that people are actually ordering and pre-ordering, and making sure that supply is always there. So the efficiency of the build starts to become in, plus the quality of the build starts to come in much, much faster. Okay. Now, when that happens, those materials, and it can be done in a couple of ways. It can be what is called panelized construction, or kit of parts. So all of these parts are made sometimes in one factory, sometimes in many factories, and they are brought to site almost like a flat pack, and they are assembled on site. Okay. The other way is it's called volumetric. So volumetric is when it's actually built into a what looks like a container, but it's not necessarily a shipping container, but it looks like a container, and it's craned into site, and they are slotted together a little bit like Lego. Okay. So both of those need to be assembled on site, and when they're assembled on site, the builder still needs to be there. They still need to have quality trades and finish these things, because that when they assemble them, they have to put the finishes on them, and so there's still work to do on the actual construction site. But the construction site side of things, the timeline starts to become much, much, much smaller. Now, to give you an example, okay, I'm currently in the middle of a project where we're doing 18 townhouses. We are looking at doing modular construction on there. Some of the modular factories that we're dealing with, their builders, once they get their kit of parts on site, a normal builder would probably spend 12, sometimes 15 months doing a 12 townhouse project. Okay. But one of the builders that we looked at doing a 12 townhouse project using a kit of parts type style was way more efficient because they were able to stand up the kit of parts so fast, okay? And they had all 12, I guess, frames and roofs watertight in about a 3-week period, okay? So 12 homes that are watertight. So that's 65% of your payment at lockup at that point in time. So that's a massive cash flow injection at that point in time. But because they're all stood up at the exact same time, it means that they could get all of their trades in. And so the plumber would start at one end with the rough end, the electrician would start at the other end with the rough end. They never needed to leave site. They would actually just go from end to end, finish the whole lot in one go. Then you can have the plasterers come in and that. And so they were able to finish the entire project from breaking ground to handing the key to the new owner, okay, it was approximately a 3-month process, okay? So that is a massive, massive contraction of your timeline. So from a builder's perspective, if you've got a limitation on your license with regards to how much construction you can actually do at any one point in time, so let's just say you've got a $5 million license, that means you can only have $5 million worth of projects on at the same time, which means if you're running a project over a 12-month period, then in that same period, you could have run 4 other projects. So that's 4 more lots of profits that you could actually get out of that particular project or those projects and those timelines by using the same by using the same team and assembling and just doing the finishes. So it's a much more efficient way of building. It's a higher quality way of building. It's a more time efficient. It's not going to save a huge amount of money from a construction cost perspective, but what it does do for you as a builder is it massively improves the profitability of your business. And what it does for a developer is it massively contracts the timeline of the project, which means our risk is that you're not going to go broke halfway through. It also means that our holding costs are down because we're not having to hold that site for so long. We've only got 3 months of holding costs and not 12 or 15 months worth of holding costs. It is a massive win on both sides of the equation. So I would absolutely categorically say, my friend, that prefab is the way of the future, and you want to get onto that as quick as humanly possible. Okay, lucky last question comes from Anthony. I have a property that has a category of special residence in Western Australia. Hello, Western Australia. As we said, we are coming to Perth in the not too distant future. I know that special residence has been removed from the category and it will be categorized as an R15 or an R10 based on the new category. What is the process of rezoning so that I can develop it? That is a fantastic question. So firstly, just for those of you who are not in Western Australia, the special residence is a category that allows for homes in semi-rural or specialized housing type facilities, okay? That designation is being slowly removed by I guess the Western Australian Planning Department, okay? And so as they do that, they're starting to rezone. Now that the rezoning has to happen at a council level. Council has to say what they want that actually zoning to do. So you've got 2 processes here. One, you can wait for council to do that rezoning. Now they don't particularly want to do one site in isolation. So what they're trying to do is to say, well, your property plus a whole bunch of other properties in the area probably have the same categorization. And so what they want to do is to go, what are we going to do with all of that as a whole and design the community of the future? So that's council's preferred path, okay? Now that process can take up to 2 years from start to finish by the time they put the research into what do they want that to be, how many people are coming into the area, what services do we need to put in here, how do we put sewer, stormwater, that sort of thing, how do they actually budget for that? Then they have to take that to state government to actually then get signed off, pre-approval. They need to get community consultation, a whole bunch of things. So give or take, that's going to take about 2 years to let the process just evolve naturally, okay? That said, you have the opportunity to fast track the process for your one specific site, but it is not going to fast track it, I guess, as much as you think, as easy as you think, because councils still have to go through the mechanism. So firstly, I highly recommend doing a pre-lodgement meeting with council, meet with their planning department to discuss what you're proposing to see if it actually aligns with their local planning strategy, depending upon how far advanced that is. And you might be able to give them get some really good insights into what that's actually going to be. Then you can submit a request for amendment, which is a formal application into the planning department, justifying why you think that the rezoning, to justify the changes that you're trying to put to their policies, site plans, and those sorts of things. You're going to need a whole bunch of reports, very similar to a normal development application. Council will then review that, and then they will have to decide that and see whether or not they want to initiate an amendment. They then have to go out to public consultation, because this is outside of the normal bounds of a normal application. And typically you're going to have to advertise that for a minimum of 42 days and sometimes upwards of 60 days, depending upon how long. So depending upon the complexity of your site. And then finally, they will then submit that to the Western Australian state government for final approving by the planning minister. So the local council can say, yeah, we're supportive of it, but it still has to go up to state government for state government to actually approve. So it is quite a complex process, and has no certainty of outcome with regards to what your zoning is actually going to be. My first step, I would say, is research your particular council and see, how far evolved they are in the process of them just rezoning it all by themselves. In many instances, they'll actually publish their draft amendments on their website. So you've actually got some visibility on what that's actually going to become. If you've got the draft one there, you can see what they're designating your particular property to be. And based on that draft, you may then consider whether or not you want to submit your pre-lodgement meeting and actually go down your fast track approval process, or whether you want to just sit back and wait, because chances are you're just going to get the outcome anyway if you're patient and if you're not in a hurry. So lots of opportunities there to actually get some quality outcomes. Either way, mate, hope that helps. And touch on again the fact that in WA, we are now launching our meetups in Perth. So we run these meetups all the way around the country already. So we run them in Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, and Adelaide, and Perth. We are officially launching in your community right now. Go to our events page. You're going to see our pre-launch event date that is actually coming up, where I'm putting some social drinks on to just get the Perth community together. And then from that, we will be telling the community exactly when our first meeting will be. And we've already got a venue chosen. We've already got a speaker chosen. We're trying to get, an influx of, industry experts and real deals that we're actually going to showcase at those Perth events. So I'm looking forward to that. So that said, folks, reminder also that we have the Developer Launchpad event happening on the 28th of February and the 1st of March. That is a 2-day event where I'm talking about all the planning regulations that have changed, the greatest planning reforms in the last 50 years. Highly recommend actually getting some visibility on that. I'm fortunate to be at the table with many of the state governments in either reviewing those before they actually go live and giving my feedback on behalf of the PDN community, or alternatively, in some instances, actually helping to actually formulate what those policies are. So I've got some key insights into not only what is there right now, but also what's coming. So I want to give that to you at the Developer Launchpad. Plus, I'm going to be talking about, how you can start from having never done a project and all the way through to, hey, how do I actually scale my business? So no matter what level of experience you're at, there's going to be heaps on offer. That plus I give you my market update as to where I think the market's going over the next 12 to 18 months. Cracking show. That said, folks, hope you have got plenty from today's show, and looking forward to seeing you at an upcoming meetup. Till then, bye for now.